The real power of portfolios of the poor and the research approach that's embodied in the financial diaries is less about providing conclusive evidence on the way that the world's poor actually live their lives, and more about expanding conversations, expanding ideas, getting a better sense of how a group of families in Bangladesh, India, South Africa live their lives, how they construe their limits, how they see their opportunities, how they think about their own situations. And in that sense, the financial diaries are really most powerful as a theory generation source rather than a theory testing source. To test theories, we really need huge data sets on thousands and thousands of households to really conclusively say, this is the way that poor people live their lives. But as a really critical step in moving in that direction, smaller, much more focused, much more open-ended studies are vital, and we don't do them enough. And financial diaries, to me, shows just how powerful that simple step can be in reshaping the way that we think about problems and defining what the next agenda is. Another important part of what the financial diaries do is to improve the quality of data. By going back to households, by spending time with households week after week or every 2 weeks, a much richer and much more complete inventory of their activity starts to emerge. Daryl Collins did some beautiful work in South Africa where she looked at the margin of error in her data, and she found that the margin of error was huge in the first few weeks. And after about 3 months, that margin of error reduced to about 6%. The result was not just a more accurate picture of the lives of those households, but a much more full story. All sorts of activities that were below the radar screen, that weren't even part of the picture, all of a sudden emerged. People were giving money to their neighbors to hold. People were saving in very informal ways. Someone might be asking their employer to give them some money, or their landlord to help out a little bit, or the shopkeeper might be extending credit. All kinds of activities that people might not have thought to tell a enumerator, a surveyor who comes around to the house one time. All of those things started to happen. And when those things emerge, it changed the way we thought about poor households. Instead of they're having simple lives, as often surveys would suggest, turns out they have complicated lives. They're juggling, they're strategizing, they've got 10 things going on at the same time, and they're trying to make sense of all these 10 things. They're very active. And in that activity, we start to see a possibility to create better tools for them. We start to see that if there are better tools, they'll seize them. They'll use them. And we can see what the design of those tools ought to look like based on what they're already doing with their neighbors informally. That's what the financial diary starts to show us. Informal activities, a broad array of activities that then provides very specific guides to action. Some of the things that we see resonate with new ideas in behavioral economics. Behavioral economics is the place where traditional economics comes together with psychology. We start to take seriously the fact that people may not be fully rational in the sort of calculating way that economists have always assumed, but which we always knew wasn't quite true to what anybody's reality really is. We see that people use sensible rules of thumb instead of fully optimizing and calculating, or people get overwhelmed by complexity. People are impatient, or people delay gratification in important ways, or might act in inconsistent ways. We all do it. And we're starting to see how these phenomena apply to poor communities and shape the options in poor communities. We start to see that richer households tend to have better devices, better ways to deal with their irrationalities than poorer communities often do. So, for example, we see that people create savings clubs when they want to save. Right? They get their friends together, and every week or every month they put some money into a common pot. That's a good way to save. It's not just good economics, it's also good psychology. It creates a structure, it creates discipline. It's very helpful against the odds.